Now let's now learn about exception hierarchy in Java. So in Java, there is an interface throwable. It is a marker interface to all things that can be thrown. So whenever you write throw, and whatever you write in here should implement this interface. Otherwise, you cannot throw it. Okay. So this is a marker interface. So it is implemented by two classes. So the first class is error and the second class is exception. Okay. So since error and exception both, we will learn about error later. But since error and exception, both of them implements throwable, so they can be thrown using throw and then new error or new exception or any child class of exception or any child class of error. Okay. So throwable is implemented by two classes, error and exception. Currently, we're talking about exception. We'll talk about errors later. Now, exception, we already learned that there are two types of exceptions, checked exceptions and unchecked exceptions. So there is a child class called RuntimeException. Okay. It has further child classes as well. So any class that extends the runtime exception is a unchecked exception. Okay. So compiler will not force you to catch the runtime exception or any of the class that extends the runtime exception. Okay. And rest all other exceptions that directly extend the exception class. They don't extend the runtime exception class. They directly extend the exception class are checked exceptions. Okay. So this is the exception hierarchy in Java. We have throwable interface. Then we have error and exception classes implementing the interface. Then in exception class, we have a runtime exception class. So runtime exception itself and all its child exceptions become the unchecked exception. Compiler will not force you to catch it. And other exceptions, which is the exception class itself and its child classes, apart from runtime exception and its child, remaining ones are checked exception. Compiler will force you to catch. Okay. So I'm repeating what I said. Why do we differentiate exception in checked and unchecked exception? Because it is possible for the compiler to detect a chance of exception in case of checked exceptions, but it is not possible for the compiler to detect a chance of exception in case of unchecked exceptions. That is why we divide them into checked and unchecked. And we also learned that there is an approach of handling them is different. For unchecked, we should use try, catch or throws. And for checked, we should be using appropriate checks like checking for zero or checking for null. We'll talk about that as well. This is all about the exception hierarchy in Java. Let's see this from the code point of view as well. So while catching a code, you can place multiple catch blocks. But the rule for using multiple catch blocks is specific exception first, broader exception after that. Or you can say child exception first, parent exception after that. So there you can see what the same thing we have done here. Runtime exception first, then its parent exception, and then its parent throwable. Okay, so if we throw runtime exception from here, first it will try to catch it in this block, then this block, then if it is not able to catch it in the first block, then it will try to catch it in the second block. Not able to catch in the second block, then it will try to catch it in the third block. So if we execute this code, we can see here that here we are throwing a runtime exception. It is coming to line number set to check if it is for the catch block of runtime. Since it is matching, it is going inside this. Now it has already been handled, so it will not go inside the other ones. If I, comment this block, comment this catch block, and if I rerun this code again, exception will be thrown at line number 17, then it will directly be handled by the exception class because exception is the parent of runtime exception. This one will be able to handle. It is able to handle itself and all its childs as well. Okay. If I comment this one also, then we only have one catch block. And then if we see, it will be handled with this throwable because throwable is kind of a parent of exception as well. Exception implements throwable. Okay. So this is the hierarchy in Java. You could have thrown a checked exception as well, like SQLException. If you throw SQLException and you don't put any code block, compiler will give you an error. If you remove this try block as well, if you remove everything, compiler will give you an error. As shown to you earlier, you will have to put either a try catch or a throws clause. So here you are catching it with the exception block. You can also catch it with, specific SQLException also, but you can catch it with a general way as well. You see, if we execute it again, exception is thrown at line number 15, it gets caught because SQLException is directly a child of exception class. So this is the exception hierarchy. Remember it always. It will be very helpful.